kind of inspiring and powerful message because it shows how much God, respects and loves and considers people responsible for themselves. At the end of the day, no matter what happens, no matter what circumstances happen, even if I get in an accident and die and go to spirit world, that autonomy remains. Like, I am ultimately responsible for how I act, how I respond to the things that happen to me, how I feel. So it's, and that was the second question Mother asked Dr. Balcom was, why do you believe? Why is that your favorite chapter, right? She really wanted to understand what it is about the favorite chapter that affects them, right? And that's my answer. The real reason predestination is my favorite chapter is this kind of, to me, the idea that there's no eternal hell, that eventually everything works out, gives me kind of a massively optimistic and also confident view on life. I'm incredibly confident that things will work out, right? And it gives me a lot of strength also when terrible things happen, or when you kind of reflect on the world and realize how actually miserable it can be, then I really still feel a lot of hope. And I kind of have this unlimited amount of hope because I know that there's no eternal hell. I know that the future is eventually going to get there, right? Even if we go backwards 300 years tomorrow, right? So the third question Mother asked then, Dr. Balcom, is, do you practice that every day, right? So it wasn't just, what's your favorite chapter, why? But is that affecting your daily life? Like, are you actually putting into practice this thing that inspires you and that you believe in? And with predestination, it's interesting because technically you could interpret predestination with a kind of, okay, I'll relax then, right? It's all going to work out in the end. I can just kind of relax and, play it safe. And no matter what I do, I'll be forgiven and I'll make it into heaven, right? That kind of, you can have a very much it's someone else's problem kind of attitude, right? And in many ways, I think that's the opposite of the message predestination is trying to give, which is one of personal responsibility. But it's easy to interpret it that way. And in fact, one time when I was in the dorm in Korea, and I had a very close friend, and he was struggling with different things, and sometimes he would get a little bit depressed, and so I tried to give him this very positive message that, don't worry so much, even if we all screw up, we'll all be okay in the end, right? And he's like, okay. And I think it helped him, but then maybe relaxed a little too much after that, right? So, but the analogy I use, and actually I'm not a big believer in analogies. I think all analogies are terrible, but then again, sometimes they're just the best thing to use, is that kind of attitude is kind of like if someone sticks a knife in your leg and you're just like, okay, I'm going to go do something else, right? It's like there's a constant pain in your leg. Your reaction, the first thing you want to do is get rid of it, right? And I feel like the way the world is, it's a constant pain, and we're just trying to ignore it, right? We're just trying to kind of do everything we can to forget. Because actually the reality is still, in the modern age, even if we say that today, this moment is the best moment in human history, objectively, it's still a pretty awful moment, right? If we're truly aware of the world, if we really are honest with ourselves, it's unbearably awful, right? It is like a knife in the leg, in that it's just terrible. And say a word like Yemen, or what's happening in Burma, or large, way too large parts of Africa, especially Sub-Sahara, India, villages. I mean, like, just a word of a place already associates people with massive amounts of suffering. So this is why I reference Jesus' words there to his disciples and Mother's word there, because what Jesus was saying to his disciples in that moment was a very powerful message. I think it's one of the most underrated quotes in the Bible, because the first part, the second part there, where Jesus says, even when I die, I'll still be alive to you, right? And And you'll realize in that moment that I am in the Father is in me, and I am in you, and you are in me. And I think the reason that quote gets ignored is because earlier when Jesus was alive and he wasn't going the way to the cross, he said very clearly, when you see me, you see the Father. And then he also said, I am in the Father and the Father is in me. And those two quotes together kind of are used as part of the theological justification that Jesus is the same as God. But then later, Jesus almost says the same thing to his disciples. When I die, people will see me through you, and I am in you and you are in me. And he's not calling the disciples God, right? He's making a very valid point about taking on the mantle of responsibility, taking on the messianic role. And so I read that, when I read the New Testament for the first time, and I read that quote where Jesus is talking to his disciples, it's not really part of our argument, our theological argument against the idea of God's divinity, Jesus' divinity. It's not really part of, it's not a quote I'd ever heard before. So I read it for myself for the first time was when I heard it, and it really impacted me because it was very much Jesus telling his disciples that they not only have the capacity to be like him, but that they should take on the same responsibility he has. So, and Mother's words are very much the same in that quote as well. That was from actually the Peace Starts With Me tour in America just a couple weeks ago, where Mother says, I hope that all of you, to a massive stadium, I think probably 30,000, 40,000 people in that stadium, all of you should take on the messianic mission, right? The messianic responsibility. And, what is that responsibility? And I think it's that responsibility of, let's say, taking out the knife, right? Understanding that the world is in pain and trying to actively, every decision we make, to try to heal that pain, to try to improve the status of the world. So a massive oversimplification, if I was to sum that up, is that, each moment, whether we're choosing to take out the knife or to push it in further, or just to ignore it, right? And, I think that is, in every single moment, if Mother asks, am I living according to my favorite chapter, that's kind of the question I have to ask myself. Am I letting this pain continue, or am I trying to work towards that ideal future? And so then the other thing that I'm very optimistic about, and I really believe, is that if then we have this lifestyle going down this path of, towards this future, this path of ending suffering, then I think that the decision to take the knife out is already success. And again, I'm sorry for the analogy, and maybe you can think of a better one. But if your decision is to, the action that you're deciding to do is helping, rather than ignoring, because by ignoring, it's hurting, then you're already successful. You might not do it very well, you might make mistakes, but if the decision, that free will that you have, is in that direction, then already you're aligned to God's will, you have God's support, you have that kind of blessing and guidance, and you will learn, and you will get better, right? And yeah, so it's something that I also think gives a lot of hope, because there's always this idea that I might be bad at it, or I'll do it wrong, right? And actually, I think in the last time I gave a service, I gave this testimony about how I made a decision to do something, and right away I felt kind of God's support and spiritual support to be successful with that. And I think it's very much like that. If our decision, if in that moment where God isn't sure what we're going to do, it's completely up to us. If that decision is to end suffering, and I really think that's the messianic heart, the messianic mission, then we're already successful. And I was thinking, actually, just this week, I was reading Mother's victory celebration in Africa, because it was the Africa Summit, right? And Mother's been doing a lot in Africa, and actually what she's done most recently is probably one of the most impressive